From the Maine Public Broadcasting Network, I'm Josie Huang, and for Tuesday, February 21st, this is Maine Things Considered. Lawmakers may let landowners seek compensation if state land use rules reduce the value of their property, but critics say this will lead to a rash of lawsuits. Critics of another bill, having to do with health insurance, say it's an attempt to protect a GOP political appointee. And a National Journalism Award goes to the Advertiser Democrat in Norway, Maine, for its series on living conditions in low-income housing.
We got a mixed reaction. We got a lot of support and rah-rah, and we got anger.
But first, this news. A small weekly newspaper in Western Maine has earned one of journalism's top honors for a series of reports on code violations in low-income government-subsidized housing and the deplorable conditions faced by those tenants. The editor and the assistant editor of the Advertiser Democrat in Norway will receive a George Polk Award for local reporting at a ceremony in April. The pair spent more than 3 months working on their exposé, which resulted in investigations at both the state and federal levels, changes in regulatory oversight, and relocation of tenants. Susan Sharon has more.
In a letter to the Advertiser Democrat, the curator of the George Polk Awards, former New York Times editor John Darnton, writes that the work was extraordinarily reported and written and carried a major impact. This is how the story opened when it was published on October 27th.
Imagine renting an apartment where, when a neighbor flushes the toilet, waste bubbles up in the bathroom sink. Or living in a third-floor apartment with the only way to get out being down the stairs because the exterior fire escape is barely attached, its nails pulling out of the wall. Or living with everything you own plugged in via various power strips and extension cords to an outlet outside of your apartment. Or with massive holes in the ceiling. Or without an exterior door. Welcome to the world of lower-income rental housing.
Ann Sheehan is the editor of the Advertiser Democrat, which is published by the Sun Media Group, which also publishes the Lewiston Sun-Journal. She has an editorial staff of 3, including herself, and a circulation of less than 7,000. Sheehan says the stories began after a fire at a rooming house across the street in May of last year. She and assistant editor Matt Hongoltz-Hetling began hearing that the building was not in compliance with health and safety codes.
And that it wasn't in compliance in a way that threatened the lives of the residents. And so then we were motivated to see whether that was an isolated incident or whether it was a broader problem. And as it turned out, it was much broader.
What kind of reaction did you get to the stories?
We got a mixed reaction. We got a lot of support and rah-rah, and we got anger from other landlords. We had a lot of blame the tenants. And the point that our response was simply we weren't looking at housekeeping issues. We were looking at structural life safety issues only. And that what we saw and what we documented had not been done by the tenants.
For example, one tenant living in Section 8 housing had problems with bats, the flying kind.
They kept on coming into her apartment, so there were just dead bats that she had to kill manually and take away from the apartment where children were being raised.
Tell me where things stand now. You've done a series of stories. It's prompted a couple of investigations at least. Some of the tenants have been relocated, but where do things stand now? It's not over.
Well, it's not over, but what we've seen is a lot of movement almost at every level, being city, state, and federal government to address the issue. And that's just been fantastic. But you know, governments take a little bit of time to address issues. So codes are being rewritten at the municipal level. The tenants were all removed from harm's way immediately. And there's a complete overhaul of MSHA's, Maine State Housing's regulations and the way that they inspect apartments. One change that I personally was very taken with is that they're going to have their housing inspectors will be equipped with cameras. So you won't really be relying on the opinion of one inspector who may not be on the same page as somebody else. You'll have some objective evidence that can be weighed and looked at to ensure safety.
The George Polk Awards in Journalism were established in 1949 by Long Island University to commemorate CBS correspondent George Polk, who was murdered in 1948 while covering the Greek Civil War. According to a press release, the awards place a premium on investigative and enterprise reporting. And this year, the Advertiser-Democrat finds itself in the company of such media outlets as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Al Jazeera English, and the public radio show This American Life, for stories ranging from coverage of the wars in Libya and Afghanistan, insider trading involving Washington officials, the Arab Spring protests, and an hour-long report about the severe punishments being handed out by a county drug court judge in Georgia. But both Sheehan and Hungold's-Heltling say that if there's one thing they've learned through their reporting experience, it's that size doesn't matter if you tell a story well.
If you have a thoughtful person with a pencil and a pad of paper, that's about all that's needed to start something.
I think we forget that we can really affect positive change sometimes.
The Polk Awards will be presented in New York City on April 5th. To read more about the Advertiser-Democrat's prize-winning stories, visit our website at mpbn.net.